How do nations actually go bankrupt? To paraphrase Ernest Hemingway, at first you go bankrupt slowly and then all at once. Does it feel like your money and retirement is in danger? With prices still elevated, high interest rates, and the mounting national debt, the present and future purchasing power and cost of living of everyday Americans is more and more uncertain. All the while, central banks around the world are reducing their dollar reserves and buying gold in record amounts not seen in history. Do they see something we don't? If you think that you may be falling short of your retirement goals, see the link in the video description to the free inflation and retirement calculator. If you are concerned about your long-term wealth preservation, then the fiat dollar is clearly failing you. So what is the future of money, and how can investments in scarce assets like physical gold and digital decentralized technologies like Bitcoin be used to counterbalance this constant erosion of our purchasing power? To discuss gold's future, we will hear from macroeconomist Luke Gromen, economist, financial broker, and author Peter Schiff, economist and investor Keith Weiner, and CEO of Shapeshift, Erik Voorhees.
US dollar fiat, which not only can be debased, but exists in a state of perpetual institutionalized debasement. This dynamic will encourage a virtuous cycle in which rational actors at the margins decide to hold the non-decaying form of money to the exclusion of that which decays. This is the primary reason gold itself has retained its position in society. It cannot be debased by governments either. When comparing two potential monetary alternatives, the one which is the hardest to debase is probably the one you should prefer, other factors being equal. Every year, fiat oozes from the sewer of state. As a consequence, it has lost 98% of its value in the past 100 years. How foolish does one need to be to hold it over the next 100?
You already had US and EU sovereign debt credibility under threat as a reserve asset. And given the US fiscal situation, the European fiscal debt situation, the US debt situation, the reaction to the Ukraine crisis in particular, the US and EU sanctions of Russia's FX reserves, I think are a Pandora's box that has been opened and I don't think can be reclosed. And so I've talked about it potentially being on level with the US's closing of the gold window in 1971 from a monetary perspective. We've seen shifts by the Russians, by the Chinese, out of dollars into gold in the case of the Russians, out of dollars into gold. I think it goes into things that better hold purchasing power, right? So it's going to be gold, hard assets.
Ultimately, if you want to go to the future, you got to go to the past. The future of money is gold. And if gold is going to be digitized, if we're going to have a gold-backed cryptocurrency backed by real money, just like the initial banknotes used to be backed by real money, then that can succeed. There are things that I can do with gold, right? There are actual things that you can do with it that you can't use other metals because they're not a good substitute because they don't share the properties of gold. Gold is very unique among metals, and there are a lot of things that you can do with it. There's real demand for gold that always will exist absent its functioning as money. And so that gives it a real floor. There's actual some tangible use. Governments watered down our monetary system gradually over time. So we started with all this trust because we weren't just trusting anything because the paper money was backed by gold. But slowly the government went off the gold standard and debased our money, and the dollar's been losing value steadily and slowly over the last 100 years. I mean, eventually it's going to collapse and, it'll go away, but it's a slow process.
In a certain sense, I don't need to prove that the dollar is failing, that the debt is skyrocketing exponentially. A quote, or at least Winston Churchill is reported to have said this. God bless the Americans, because after they've tried everything else, they'll do the right thing. We've used gold as money historically. It works surprisingly well. The UK, when England ran the world's trade in the late 1890s, the system was so efficient that there was 160 tons of gold in London at the time of the peak of this gold standard. Today, the state of Nevada produces 166 tons. So it was very efficient. It worked very well. I don't necessarily need to prove that we're going to do the right thing, as Winston Churchill gave his very perverse backhanded blessing of all this. I just need to prove the proposition or defend the proposition that gold is going to remain an important form of money, not the only, not the leading, not take over as the gold standard, which my company is working to do. That's our raison d'etre. And in order for this proposition to fail, I'm going to make the argument that two things would have to occur. Both gold would have to cease to be what it's been, how it's still behaving even today. Gold would have to change its behavior and do an abrupt U-turn. And in addition to that, either the failing dollar, which I think most of the people in this room agree is failing, would have to change its nature as well. And if gold or the dollar or Bitcoin doesn't change, then gold is going to continue to remain an important form of money in the 21st century. And so if you're thinking about this proposition, are these things going to change what they are? I would just conclude by saying the tiger does not change his stripes.
How do you hedge against an ever-depreciating fiat dollar? Own the opposite. Sound money. Sound money is built with assets that have scarcity, a long track record of trust and value, and cannot be printed by central banks. Policymakers, institutions, and governments may decide the fate of our currency. It's our responsibility to safeguard the wealth we have, because no one else is going to do it for us. If you are ready to start protecting your retirement savings through a tax-deferred gold IRA, see the links to the free guides in the video description. To attend a free gold education webinar held by Augusta Precious Metals, see the link in the video description. I will leave you with a customary quote from the famous hockey player Wayne Gretzky: "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been." Thanks for watching.